Oh
When
my
I was
God, this
24
thing
years
is
old,
happening.
marriage
Oh,
was
no,
the
no.
only thing on my
I can't
mind.
believe this. Oh my God, I can't believe this.
Everywhere
This
I
changes
went,
everything.
someone was getting
What am I going to
married.
do?
My church friends were posting wedding pictures every weekend. My cousins were sending baby photos to the family group chat. At family gatherings, the same question kept coming again and again. Emily, when will we attend your own wedding? People said it jokingly, but every time I heard it, it felt like a knife entering my chest. I began to believe something was wrong with me. I believed I was behind in life. I started praying harder than I had ever prayed before. I fasted for 3 days sometimes. I joined midnight prayer groups online. I wrote prayer points in a notebook and read them every morning. One of those prayer points said, "God, give me my husband this year. I cannot wait anymore." I meant every word. I was desperate. I remember one night in church during a prayer service, the pastor said something that made my heart jump.
Before this year ends, some women here will receive their
He
husbands.
said, "Before this year ends, some women here will receive their husbands." When I heard those words, tears ran down my face. I lifted my hands and began to cry. In my mind, I said, "God, let it be me. Please let it be me." That was the night I met Daniel. After the service, people were greeting each other outside the church building. A tall man with a confident smile walked toward me. "Hello," he said. "My name is Daniel. I noticed you during prayer. You have strong faith." At that moment, my heart began beating fast. I thought maybe this was the miracle I had been praying for. Daniel spoke well. He carried himself with confidence. He told me he worked in business and traveled often. He also said he loved God and was searching for a serious woman who wanted marriage, not games. Everything he said sounded like the exact answer to my prayers. Looking back now, I realize I did not know him at all. But at that time, I did not care about knowing him deeply. All I cared about was that he wanted marriage, and I wanted marriage too. Our relationship moved very quickly. Daniel called me every morning. He sent long messages about building a future together. He spoke about the house we would live in, the children we would have, and the kind of life he wanted to build. Every conversation made my heart feel full. My friends even warned me. One of them said, "Emily, slow down, you barely know him." But I refused to listen. In my mind, delaying the relationship meant delaying my miracle. 3 months later, Daniel proposed to me. It happened at a restaurant during dinner. He placed a ring on the table and said he wanted me to become his wife. I did not even take time to think. I said yes immediately. That same night, I posted the ring online with the caption, "God answers prayers." My phone exploded with congratulations. My family celebrated. My church celebrated. Everyone said I was blessed. But deep down, there were small things that made me uncomfortable. Daniel had a temper that appeared suddenly. Sometimes when he got angry about small things, his face changed completely. Another thing was his secrecy. He often stepped outside to answer calls. When I asked questions, he became defensive. But each time my mind raised concerns, I pushed the thoughts away. I kept telling myself something simple: no marriage is perfect. The wedding preparation moved fast. Within 6 months, we were standing in church saying our vows. I remember looking at Daniel during the ceremony and thinking my life had finally started. I thought every struggle before that day was over. I thought happiness was waiting for me on the other side of that altar. But the first shock came only 2 weeks after the wedding. One evening, Daniel returned home late. His mood was heavy and aggressive. I tried to ask if something was wrong. Instead of answering normally, he exploded in anger. The words he used were painful. I stood there, confused. I had never seen him behave like that before. Later, he apologized and said work pressure made him act that way. I accepted the apology, but the incidents continued. Every few days, another argument appeared. Sometimes the arguments started from nothing. If dinner was late, he became angry. If I asked questions about money, he became angry. If I mentioned something that annoyed him, he became angry. The man who once spoke about building a beautiful future with me began turning into someone I did not recognize. I started feeling fear in my own home, but something inside me refused to accept the truth. I kept telling myself that marriage required patience. I believed if I prayed more, things would change. So I began praying again. I prayed the same way I prayed when I was looking for a husband. The difference was that now my prayer sounded different. God, please fix my marriage. Months passed and things became worse. Daniel began staying out overnight sometimes. When I asked where he went, he answered with anger or silence. One day I found messages on his phone from another woman. My heart felt like it stopped beating. When I confronted him, he denied everything and accused me of spying on him. That night I cried for hours. I remembered all the prayers I prayed before marrying him. I remembered how I believed he was the miracle God sent into my life, but the pain kept growing. Soon financial problems began appearing. Daniel started asking me for money from my savings. At first, I helped because I believed we were building a future together, but the requests became constant. I began to wonder where his own money was going. One evening, a stranger came to our house looking for Daniel. The man said Daniel owed him a large amount of money. I felt my stomach turn. I realized there were parts of my husband's life I knew nothing about. That night, I sat alone in the living room thinking about everything. For the first time, a question appeared in my mind that terrified me. What if I had made a mistake? What if the man I begged God for was not the man God chose for me? But even then, I was not ready to face the truth, because facing the truth meant admitting that my desperation had led me into a trap. I continued staying in the marriage. I continued hoping things would change. I continued believing that love and prayer would fix everything. What I didn't know was that the worst part of the story had not even started yet. And when the truth finally appeared, it would change everything I believed about marriage, faith, and the prayers I once begged God to answer.
Lord, I need you now. Please give me
The day
strength.
everything
Help me
changed
through this.
started like an ordinary morning. Daniel had already left the house before I woke. That had become normal. Sometimes he left early without telling me where he was going. I tried not to think too much about it, because thinking only brought pain. Instead, I focused on my job and church activities. Those were the only places where I still felt peace. But that afternoon, my phone rang while I was at work. The number was unfamiliar. I almost ignored the call, but something pushed me to answer it. The voice on the other side was a woman. Her tone was calm but serious. She asked if I was Emily, Daniel's wife. When I said yes, there was a long pause. Then she said something that made my entire body freeze. "We need to talk about your husband." I felt fear immediately. She asked if we could meet somewhere that evening. My mind filled with questions. I almost refused, but curiosity forced me to agree. That evening, I arrived at the small cafe where we planned to meet. When the woman walked in, I noticed she looked nervous. She sat down and looked directly at me before speaking. "My name is Grace," she said, "and Daniel is also my husband." At first, I thought I had heard the wrong words. My brain refused to understand what she said. But then she placed something on the table. It was a photograph of her wedding day. Standing beside her in the picture was Daniel, wearing a suit and smiling. My chest felt tight. My mind could not process the information. I stared at the photo again and again, hoping it would change. Grace explained everything slowly. She said she had been married to Daniel for 5 years. They had 2 children together. Recently, she discovered he had been seeing another woman. That woman was me. The room felt like it was spinning, my head filled with confusion and anger. "That is impossible," I told her. "Daniel married me in church." Grace looked at me with deep sadness. Then she showed me documents on her phone, their marriage certificate, pictures of their children, messages Daniel sent to her just the night before. At that moment, the truth became impossible to deny.
The man I begged God to give me as a husband already had a wife and children. I left the cafe feeling like my life had collapsed. When Daniel returned home that night, I confronted him immediately. At first, he denied everything, but when I showed him the evidence, his attitude changed. Instead of apologizing, he became angry. He said I should not have met Grace. He said I was causing problems for him. Listening to those words felt like another knife entering my chest. That was the moment I realized something painful. The man I married was not the man I thought he was. He had built an entire life based on lies. Over the next few weeks, more truth appeared. Daniel had debts everywhere. He had relationships with multiple women. The business he claimed to run didn't even exist the way he described it. I felt ashamed of myself. I kept asking one question again and again: how did I not see this? The answer slowly became clear. I did not see the truth because I did not want to see it. My desperation to get married made me ignore every warning sign. I rushed into a life I did not understand. The emotional pain during that time was heavy. Some nights I could not sleep. Some days I cried without knowing why. I felt embarrassed facing my family and church members who celebrated my marriage months earlier. But something unexpected also began happening inside me. Slowly, I began rediscovering my strength. One evening, I sat alone thinking about everything that had happened, and a realization appeared in my mind that changed my life forever. Marriage was never supposed to be the thing that defined my value. My desperation had made me believe that being single meant failure. That belief pushed me into a dangerous situation. Eventually, I made the most difficult decision of my life. But I also learned lessons that changed me forever. I learned that desperation can make a person ignore wisdom. I learned that prayer should never replace careful thinking and patience. I learned that marriage is not a reward for suffering or waiting. It is a partnership that requires truth and respect. Today, when people hear my story, some ask if I regret praying for marriage. My answer always surprises them. I do not regret praying, but I regret the desperation behind those prayers. Because desperation made me rush, and rushing almost destroyed my life. My name is Emily. The marriage I begged God for almost destroyed me. But the lessons I learned from surviving it rebuilt me into a stronger woman. And sometimes surviving the wrong marriage can become the beginning of the right life.
This is Beyond Stories, where every story carries a lesson, and every lesson touches the heart. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could inspire your next step.